Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the Transport and Place Scrutiny panel for the 13th of November 2025. During the meeting, all participants will be in control of their own microphone, so please ensure that you turn your microphone on when you are speaking and remember to turn it off when you are finished. All reports published as part of the agenda will be considered as read by members of the public. As read by members of the panel. Published reports will therefore be summarised to allow the panel to focus on questions. Item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies received for Councillor Dowse and Councillor Davis, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Scott MacDonald. Item 2, urgent business, none is received. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have to declare an interest? No. Okay, item 4, we've got the minutes. Is everyone happy to confirm as accurate the minutes of the meetings held on the 3rd of July 2025 and the 7th of October 2025? Agreed? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we have 2 items tonight. Item 5 is flood risk strategy and surface water management plan. And we have Alex Sexton, Dan Atkinson and Councillor Callum O'Byrne-Mulligan to join us. So we'll kick off. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Chair. And it still feels a bit odd to be sat this side of rather than round there for one of these. So we've got a quick update on the local flood risk management strategy. I will try not to stumble over that as I say it again. Update of it is underway. First draft is complete and we are hoping to go out to consultation with the public very soon. This action plan frames the work and projects of the flood team for the next 5 to 6 years. We don't have and are not required to have a surface water management plan. Other updates are that the £1 million natural flood management project, which began last year, is progressing well, and we're about to move into the construction phase. And the improvements that we're seeing there are coming through with the gully cleaning service. I'll turn over to Alex and Dan to say a little bit more about the flood risk management plan, but I think it's really positive, the progress and the work that they've done, and so I'm very grateful for Dan in particular. I think's kind of carried the can on this, so thank you.
Hi, thanks very much. So the Scrutiny report circulated updates on specifically the local flood risk management strategy and the surface water management plan. But our responsibilities cover a lot more than that. In the last year, the flood risk and drainage team has become a bit more established with changes in personnel and through moving forward with new work and projects. So just to sort of do an overview on the strategy and the surface water management plan. The local flood risk management strategy is a statutory document required under the Flood and Water Management Act. Ours is out of date and needs to be reviewed. It basically outlines our flood risk goals as a borough and is accompanied by an action plan which outlines some more general goals as well as specific work to be completed over the next 5 years. This is the main document for the flood team, and all other work that we do basically sits underneath it. In May this year, we appointed a consultant to assist with producing this strategy update. They've produced the first draft, which has undergone internal consultation with teams including planning, emergency planning, parks, highways, and the sustainability team. The strategy has been updated, and we're now in a position where we need to go out for a period of public consultation. That is a statutory requirement of the strategy, and our approach is currently being finalised. It's a minimum of 6 weeks, and we're aiming to have it reviewed and updated after the consultation and signed off by Cabinet to be published in springtime. So in section 5.1 of the decision report that was circulated, it does say the consultation period is expected to begin in November and is estimated to last 6 weeks. So 6 weeks is still accurate, but we have been a bit delayed on getting the consultation period underway, so it looks like it's going to be January time. And moving on, the surface water management plan, it's not something that we currently have, and it's not a statutory document. They're typically undertaken in areas where authorities are aware of flooding issues, or where areas have specific risk of flooding. We're really quite fortunate to not have any issues or locations that really need a surface water management plan. It should be considered as a nice-to-have document, but we have other projects, other work where our resources can be better spent. And nowadays, the local flood risk management strategy is sort of seen as the main document rather than a surface water management plan. So if we do want a surface water management plan, it would sit beneath the umbrella of the strategy. Yeah, I suppose that's sort of the update from me.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. So I'll open it to questions from the panel. We'll try and limit to about 30 minutes of questions for this item, but Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. It's great that we've got this kind of after the delay, which was, you've explained the reasons for that, but it's great we're getting this strategy up and running. I did have a question, and strangely on surface water flood risk, because it mentioned in the report we don't need one, and you've restated that as well. But I did notice on in section 3.54 of the strategy, you've listed areas that are at risk of surface water flooding. So that seems to be slightly incongruous, and I'm just wondering what sort of, if that's something you considered, so just to sort of explain that incongruity. And also I couldn't miss this opportunity to ask you again, I think I did last year, about if any root cause has been established for the sinkholes on Dunvegan Road. My ward at one stage was the sinkhole capital of London, so it'd be nice to have an update on that.
So yeah, first part of your question, there are certainly locations in Greenwich that are more prone to flooding than others. Whether or not they need a surface water management plan is another question. Generally, surface water management plans are detailed, and they carry out some modelling. They look into specific causes, that sort of stuff, and then options available. With these locations, either we're aware of what the issues are and we don't have the resources to put something into place, but they're not unknowns in the sense that we need to carry out a surface water management plan, if that makes sense. We sort of know what the causes are. Yeah, if that answers it.
So I think it's a case of we're looking to cover where there are surface water issues with the wider strategy, rather than us needing to have a full surface water strategy as well, because the extent of the challenge we think can be captured within the wider flood risk management plan. Does that make sense?
So, sorry, you're saying that you kind of understand the risks, but there's no need for a specific documentation of what needs to be done in case there are flooding there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah, I think you've sort of summarised it quite well, and to be honest, yeah.
I was just going to mention on Dunvegan Road, so that wasn't a naturally made sinkhole, actually. It was Thames Water pipe bursting. So, yeah, that wasn't a natural sinkhole that we have. It was a sort of man-made, if you like, issue there.
That's interesting, because they said it was the council, so that might be something to delve into a bit more deeply. Thank you.
Gardner.
Thank you. Good evening. So I've got two strands, really, of questioning. So one is more big picture, which is constituent put to me, someone very experienced, that actually, if you look at the Thames riverfront, 4 kilometres of which, in my ward, we've got 14k altogether in the borough, there are issues across the Thames riverfront in terms of flooding at the moment, and obviously that will increase. There was quite a lot of very high water this last weekend, for example, but the incidences of high water are increasing, and that will, sadly, with global warming, continue. So at the moment, there's a very piecemeal approach to looking at the height of the flood defences. I'm not talking about the Thames Barrier, that's a wider issue, national infrastructure, but I'm talking about the height of the Thames frontage, the Thames path above the riverfront. And someone put it to me, actually, what we need is to actually, like, you know, many other rural areas have done when there have been floods, to bid for some major government flood risk funding, to take a more holistic view. So we're not just every time there's a development saying, oh, can you do this bit of revetment, or can you do this, and it being inconsistent and so forth, but take a more holistic view across the Thames riverfront. Certainly most of Denise of my ward and much of Thamesmead is at the moment within the flood plain and liable to flooding. And I think the danger is if we don't do that, we continue to get stipulations from the Environment Agency that we got to leave, we can't put habitable rooms at the ground floor, which leads to poorer quality communities because you're not getting the active frontages and the animation and people's ownership of the area. It does lead to much poorer quality of community if you can't have habitable rooms on the ground floor. So I just wonder, we're taking a more wider strategic view of the whole Thames frontage. My second point is a bit different, and you'll forgive me because I've been going on about this for years. It's about people paving over their gardens. I'm not sure that, I couldn't see it referred to, but you know, London's lost a third of its front gardens. That includes many council properties as well, where we don't seem to ask people not to pave over their front gardens. I very much appreciate the planning constraints on this and planning permitted development and so forth, but there is so much more we could do because our enforcement is very, very weak. Planning enforcement is very weak, and there isn't any reference there as to how we can, A, prevent further erosion of that vital green greenery so that you get the natural drainage, but also how we can incentivize people to return their front gardens and much of their back gardens to greens, and how we can better inculcate that within the planning system, but also working through our own housing stock and with registered providers to increase the amount. Obviously, we're limited to how much we can increase the green space, public green space, as we know, but we could do a lot to increase private green space. And just wondered what our approach is there and how the strategy is underpinning and enabling that.
I watched the scrutiny last year, so I sort of anticipated these issues coming up. So firstly, with regards to the Thames plan, the Thames 2100 plan, because obviously the Thames is an Environment Agency designated main river, the plan is sort of within their realm. We're a key stakeholder within it, but they're putting the plan together. So I can do an update on that. Last Monday, we had a call with them, planning team, us, and I think there were a handful of others in there, and they gave us an update on the Thames 2100 plan. It's currently in phase 1B, where the Environment Agency are defining their visions and plans for the defence upgrade. So from 2035, they're going to start to reshape riversides, and from 2050, they'll be delivering end-of-century options, which could be in the form of an upgraded Thames barrier, a new barrier, flood storage areas, or something else. So we're still in the early stages, considering options basically, and then phase 2 will be starting to implement some of the more simple options. As I say, we're a key stakeholder, so we can try and influence that as much as we can through planning. So the major projects, we've got Morden Wharf, Greenwich Peninsula, Royal Arsenal and Thamesmead. We can influence the Thames 21 plan through our own planning. And then with regards to your second point, the front garden, it's definitely an issue. I think that's unavoidable. It's a national issue. Policing the building new driveways is really difficult. Some people cover their driveways in non-permeable material, which you do need planning permission for, which quite often isn't got. And those that do use permeable materials, whilst planning permission is not required, there's no guarantee they're being constructed to a level, to the right standards. I think, as you said, we simply don't have the resources to police this, which is unfortunate. But through other measures such as discouraging crossovers and development around EV charging, we can try to influence good changes. As you say, yeah, it's an issue that, but it is really hard to manage.
And I think part of that is also covered in some of the climate, sustainability and biodiversity documents associated with the local plan. So I think when that goes out to consultation, there's an opportunity to feed in further, but there is definitely, there are specific parts of that relate to driveways and and tightening up rules about only having permeable materials. But yeah, I think it's a point well taken about enforcement, and as somebody who's been on planning as well and has seen developments in my own ward, as all of us will have done, that we're not necessarily convinced are being done. That's a wider problem, and I think it's a legacy of over a decade of austerity. And I think on your first point, it's also worth us just remembering the role that this committee has played in some of that with the Thames Path Review, which I think goes to ONS next week, and I think makes some pretty helpful and instructive guidance on that. And I think that's well timed as well, given the local plan coming up. And so I think these things are coming together at quite a helpful time, actually. So yeah, I think points are well taken and received.
I was going to just add one more point as well, sorry. Just on the driveways, the issue is as well is that even if they are, say it's permeable, it might not be permeable because you could have concrete underneath, for example. So it's that policing element, again, is really, really hard. And it's something that it's going to be very difficult to even sort out. But I think looking at crossover policy and these sort of things is probably the way to go, and something we can consider.
Great.
Maybe I'll come back later. Yeah.
Councillor Anning?
Thanks very much, Chair. My two questions are rather similar, but I wanted to first of all ask a micro question about the permeability of public realm, permeability of pavements in the public realm. So could you let me know whether that is a stipulation, existing stipulation, or whether that could be put into any draft? Because I think that's, while it's not related to flooding as such, it can contribute to stagnant water in lots of different parts, especially around estates, but also in the public realm, for example, Cutty Sark and a path, etc. And the other question is that we've now just heard, as of today, the warning from the COP Environment Summit that global warming has now hit 2.6 degrees, and is at critical phase now. So would it be useful to take these new scientific statements into account to perhaps update the report, because obviously we know that extra global warming, it's a 5-year report, right? So it's a 5-year perspective, is going to be affected by that. And while, as you say, the Thames is not completely under your control as such, but you are going to have to take that into account in terms of your calculations. So there's a micro question and a macro question. Thanks.
So for your the large question, the strategy is going to be designed to be effectively a live document, so we can update it probably annually, I would imagine, for changes with these sort of changes. Within the action plan, I think that's where that's the important bit for kind of day-to-day work. That outlines the work, the projects that we can undertake to meet our targets set out in the strategy over 5 or 6 years. But in terms of planning especially, any development that comes forward has to be designed for climate change with that in mind. So all of the drainage has to be oversized in case we do see the massive storms that we could one day see. So even though in the latest COP updates the percentage has increased, it's still within the realms of what we had already planned for. Does that answer the question? Sorry.
But I think it's precisely why we've really tried to bring this forward, is conscious of the impact of climate and changing weather and the importance of that. And it's also why there is the mechanism built in to review and update this annually. But also, we're going to consultation. This is where we seek to get additional feedback if there are any gaps that people spot in it. And so I really would encourage people to read the document in detail, and when the consultation goes live, to respond to it.
Just on the permeable paving point, so a lot of our paving generally isn't that permeable, it's fair to say. One of the key things that we need to start looking at is how we can test different types of materials, and this is something that we might have to do in a trial based on seeing, because also we need to look at the maintenance of these assets as well and take those into account when we're dealing with it. So permeable materials generally seem to work very well around trees and these sort of things. That could be on footways. And then equally, getting in more sustainable urban drainage systems is a key thing that we need to be working on. And we're looking at that. We did put a bid in to the GLA actually for sustainable urban drainage systems, but unfortunately we didn't get the funding. So they've asked for us to reapply back in February. So we're going to do that as well and work with some partners on a bid for that funding as well.
And
just a comment, it's very difficult to persuade people not to cement over their driveways when in our public realm we don't have permeable pavements.
It's also why we're looking to do SUDs wherever we can as well. So when we do bits of reworking on junctions and so on, we'll do that. And in the Sustainable Streets proposals as well, there are lots of options for additional SUDs. And I know, some of the pocket parks that we've talked about trying to get in our ward as well, I think are another example. And I think it shows the need to work across departments as well, because some of that is about engaging with tenancy and also with private housing developers who have current ones. So I think that's all things that we can take forward, and having this strategy will strengthen our hand in having some of those conversations and discussions. Thanks
so much. Just a kind of connected question. Do we think, in terms of where you've got quite wide roads that maybe aren't necessary for the vehicles going down them, and we might look to narrowing them in the future, will this strategy sort of connect maybe with transport to influence that, or how do you sort of see that the strategy working with those kind of wider roads?
So we have the curbside strategy, which falls under the transport strategy, and that basically is looking to make our curbside much more sustainable. That is not only about people walking more, cycling more, using public transport more, but I think it integrally links as well to the climate change adaptation side as well, where we need to input SUDs, trees, vegetation as well. So that's where what we're working towards, and we have got a number of schemes that are in feasibility design at the moment, trying to include sustainable urban drainage systems in where we've got the width, because we know that if we want to do our part in the climate emergency, we have to be looking at these sort of things. So.
Any other questions from the panel? No? Councillor Gardner, second bite of the...
Second bite. So I just wanted to come back, if I might, on gardens, because I think Councillor Anning raised a very important point on public realm, but in my view there's still far too much hard landscaping and not enough soft landscaping. That's changing slightly. It's improving slightly, I think. But on private gardens, I think that I just feel there is so much more we could do. We'd use environment champions and so forth to report things. There's so much more we could do in terms of our tenancy management role, in terms of, we've got people walking the streets all the time when they're doing highways inspections and so forth. So there are lots of different routes to identify these properties, but it's also the signals that we send out. And the more, I'm all in favour of, generally I'm in favour of principal CPZs. I know it's a touchy subject at the moment, but the trouble with CPZs often is while they have many advantages, because they stop, to shop head and railhead parking and so forth, the disadvantage is that people then think, well, I'm not going to pay £100, I'll conquer over my front garden. And it's, even recently we had a planning application for the new development in Charlton in Marion Road by Lovells, and we were putting parking front garden parking, we're building it into a new application. I was amazed. I challenged it. Of course, we don't normally do that, but it's a matter of viability of the scheme, it was said. I really challenged it, but I didn't vote against it because obviously I wanted the scheme to go ahead because it's important. But we're not exercising sufficient consistent policy across directorates and with our partners in order to change behaviours, both for past and present. So I would like to see in this report some, council strategy to better both enforce, and don't forget Environment Agency guidance are that no more than 60% of a front garden should be used. It should be permeable, obviously, and there should still be biodiversity and so forth. And obviously you need the 4.2 metres. Many people canker over their front gardens and park their cars there that go into the pavement, as Alex will know. Very rarely do they get tickets. So there are all sorts of things that we can do, but it is stepping that up, I think. So we are trying as far as possible to, and it's so important, not just for biodiversity and obviously flood minimisation, water runoff and so forth. It's also important for the look and feel of our streetscape. So I would like to see some reference in the strategy to a whole council approach to both reduce the hemorrhaging of gardens, of front gardens to but also to ensure more coordinated enforcement.
So the strategy does acknowledge the increased pressure that comes from some of that paving over of front gardens. I think we've got to be careful in terms of which particular council policy area this is most applicable to, and I think this is probably more something that's a planning consideration, and the flood strategy sits behind that to inform that as it goes into the local plan, and how we then, as members of planning board and local planning committee, will consider some of these things. But it is directly acknowledged in the report. I think 3.54 does specifically note the increase of impermeable surfaces as one of the challenges, and I think through the consultation that could be a chance where we can increase attention on that if that's something. So I would encourage you, David, Councillor Gardner, to submit a response to the consultation.
To add to that as well, from a planning perspective, all developments, regardless of if they're major or minor, now are expected to consider SUDs, and obviously that comes through me or the flood team for comment. So we're kind of getting on top of that. And in addition to that, and it was mentioned last scrutiny, we are in the process of carrying out a SUDs and greening opportunity map project. It did begin earlier this year, and we started putting it together on our GIS systems. But last month we were made aware that the GLA are carrying out their own SUDs opportunity mapping, which is going to be made available at the end of this year. And it sounds like, and from what I've seen from screenshots, it's largely going to be what I wanted to produce which is good. And for the sake of not duplicating work, I'm going to wait for that to come out and use it as a base layer for us to add our own layers. So critical drainage areas, our sustainable streets areas, that sort of stuff on top of it. And from there, we can build a kind of a detailed list. I know in the scrutiny last year, you said about central reservations becoming more grade. So it's that sort of thing that we want to add on to the opportunity. It doesn't mean that every opportunity is going to be visited. It will prioritise them based on how many sort of priority zones they sit within. It will be based on their flood risk. But if you have any sites, please get in touch and we'll be keen to add them to the mapping.
Yeah, Councillor Vandenbroek.
Thanks. I wasn't going to say much because most of this is such high level in an area that I know very little about. However, I've decided that now we're looking at 354, I will go into it a little bit and go quite right down to quite a low level. What isn't mentioned there is cleaning the drains. If you could put down along those other roads, Park Drive and Cemetery Lane, which every winter since I've been a councillor have flooded. And the reason they're flooding is because the drains at the side of the roads need an awful lot of cleaning. There's parks and the cemetery nearby, etc. But when those drains are fully cleaned, it doesn't happen. When they're not, people's houses are actually getting flooded. We're not talking about just a bit of surface water. We're talking about going into people's houses at the far end of Park Drive. So, sorry, I decided not to because it's high level, and that's really detailed level, but I've thrown it in anyway. Thanks.
No, I expected gullies and drain cleaning to come up at some point. So the 3.5.4, the sites listed there are the areas at a high risk of flooding based on the Environment Agency national mapping. So they're a few sort of key sites, but there's many more across Greenwich that would fit within that that criteria. But with regards to the gully cleansing, we are in the process of making some changes. For now, it is continuing as usual, but in May we introduced a piece of asset management software called Carbon Tech, and it allows us to record all gully cleans, the silt levels in gullies, all visits, whether or not they're operational or non-operational. And using that data, we can inform more efficient and effective cleaning programs. Once we've collected enough data and we can really inform that, we are aiming to move to a risk-based approach. So areas or gullies that get blocked with silt, where gullies that are in areas with high leaf fall, such as the locations you were talking about, or areas that are more prone to flooding generally, we can clean those more frequently, and the gullies that are less prone or more self-cleansing can be put on a lower priority or less frequent regime. So I'm not sure the timescale of that. It really depends on how the data comes in, but we're trying to get that up to speed as soon as we can.
I think the residents there would be extremely grateful for that. And, you know, as I say, each year it's been an emergency thing. People's garages and houses are flooded, and we know it's happening. It's both topography. There's a way that the roads go there as well. So it'd be great if this that can be looked at.
I think they've already undertaken surveys, and we've surveyed over 21,000 gullies already as part of that kind of intelligence and data-led work, which means we can preemptively figure out, as was being said, though. So work is underway. I think there are 2 crews working kind of round the clock on gully clearances as well. So we've increased capacity already, as well as getting these improved systems and technology to help us do it in a smarter way.
Great, thank you very much. Oh,
I was just going to say, and just to add, that is our cyclical gully cleansing programme. Outside of that, any residents can report blocked gullies, drains, that sort of stuff, and we can action those as they come in.
They do, but it seems to be, we could preempt it. We know it's going to happen.
We rely on those. We do rely on those reports, though. I think a lot of people think they're not. They are ignored, but we do action them and try and pick them up.
I have a final quick question, unless anyone else has got any. Just on the objectives for the management strategy, I think you've got them listed in 4.3. Objective A is about improving knowledge and understanding of the flood risk, and Objective E is about improving community awareness and preparedness of flood risk. I took that as like Objective A is about the council internal and Objective E is about the community residents. Is that right? Have I read that right? Is that right? And if so, how do they kind of connect as well?
Yeah, exactly right. So Objective A is trying to collect data to inform our flood awareness of the borough, and Objective E is actually engaging with the public. So whether that's around how to protect their properties, whether that's getting involved with projects, flood management projects, those are the two sort of aspects to that. So we need to find out where we need to do the work, and then once we know that, we can get communities involved.
Okay, is there any other questions for any more? We're at 30 minutes. Brilliant, thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a great report, and also I think everyone's like very happy to see this work coming forward. Did anyone want to make any recommendations at the moment, or?
Just a small point, Chair, in section 3.57, there's a description of the Broadwater, formerly the Royal Arsenal Canal, and it states it's an aesthetic water feature in North Greenwich, when of course I think it's in West Thamesmead, so you might want to correct that.
Typo category. I got it. No, it's good spot. Anyone else? No.
How often do we get this report? Is it an annual or is it biannual?
We've started it bringing it in annually. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fine then. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll close this item and take a moment for everyone to change chairs. Great, thank you very much. So we're going to start item 6, which is on estate regeneration, and we have Dermot Whelan, Assistant Director of Regeneration and Estate Renewal, and Councillor Majid Rahman, Cabinet Member for Planning, Estate Renewal and Development. So I don't know if Councillor Rahman, you want to introduce it with yourself with Dermot Whelan, and then we'll do questions afterwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel, for this opportunity. So it's an opportunity for us to really talk about the Council's approach to estates regeneration across the borough. And it's important to appreciate that central to our missions on estate regeneration, we're ensuring safe and secure homes and delivering positive development, creating vibrant neighbourhoods, and ensuring that at the heart of this is us listening to the communities. In March of last year, the Cabinet approved a new approach to council-led estate regeneration. And this in recognition of the urgent pressures on the council, as we are faced with more than 25,000 households on the housing register and just over 1,900 families in temporary accommodation. So our response has to be strategic, sustainable, and above all, community-led. We've taken lessons from previous projects, such as Kidbrooke Village, which is formerly the Ferry Estate, and also Woolwich Estates, which is formerly Connaught Estates, Morris Walk, Marion Grove, and Marion Road. Both of those projects have been a great example of a really good regeneration project as a whole, providing thousands of homes, creating new, as well as new homes, schools, community hubs, and green spaces. But they also have highlighted certain challenges because of the complexities in these long-term projects, funding uncertainties, and the need for a stronger resident engagement program. So one of the things that we've looked at is a new estate regeneration engagement framework, which is very important. This commits us to early and open continuous dialogue with residents, putting the residents at the heart of this process, ensuring there's a balance on estates where regeneration is proposed, and provides independent advice and fair remuneration to residents who contributes towards this framework. We also are undertaking perception surveys, so to understand how residents feel about their new homes, and this will also help us guide. This will also help guide us in terms of our long-term decisions on asset management. It will work alongside our robust asset management data and new strategic outline business case framework, assessing the viability of new estate regeneration projects coming forward. So just looking at the strategic outline business case framework, this will help provide a consistent and transparent methodology for evaluating future regeneration projects across the borough. And again, this will look at council-owned residential assets, which will be working alongside or supported by the condition surveys being conducted by the Housing and Safer Communities Department. And it's also important so that we manage resources effectively and improve quality and sustainability of our housing stock. So just to highlight a few of our key steps going forward, just to re-mention, the engagement framework will be a co-design approach with residents, and applying a strategic approach, so looking at creating business cases for regeneration projects going forward, commission expert advice and viability on procurement, and communicate openly and with affected communities about the regeneration going forward, and as well as a perception survey which will be undertaken on the selected estates from the accelerated shortlist of estates already reviewed. And just to summarize, well, just the last couple of lines really, it's, as we know, estate regeneration is not an easy thing to do. We've had two really huge projects in Woolwich and Kidbrooke Park estates, and they've been great projects for us, for our residents, but they've also been huge lessons from them. So we want to be able to embody the lessons from those, and going forward, we want to make sure that what it would do is community-led and focus on quality housing and ensures our residents' well-being. Thank you.
Great. Dominic, do you want to add anything, or we'll go straight to questions? Okay, great. We're going to start at this side of the room. Councillor Anning, go for it.
Thanks very much, Chair. Do we have a copy of the accelerated shortlist? So that's not been released. Okay. And second question is, could I make a plea for consideration of cooling measures in any regeneration projects, mainly because we all know that the summers are going to get warmer, and if it doesn't entail complete demolition and rebuilding, but refurbishing, then of existing stock, we have to then look very seriously at the health consequences of severe heat, especially in some of our older council blocks, because as you well know, tenants have registered up to 35 degrees in the high summer inside their blocks. So as well as the damp and mould issue and insulating for the cold weather, it appears now, strangely enough, that we are now going to have to much more consider hot weather. So I think, literally from a health point of view, this is almost an emergency, and any decision on what you do with council blocks should really take that into account very seriously. And is that already on the radar?
Am I working now? Excellent, okay. Apologies. It's on the radar in the industry. I can't give an example of where it is currently being designed in because of the stage at which most of our designs are at. but to put it into context, that specific matter is being included in the future guidance on building design and planning regulations in the future London plans. What has been recognised is that possibly there's been overcompensation for other energy savings, which has now, as you say, created that overheating. And to a degree, the overprovision of nice amenity space has created big, wide open windows, which obviously do attract, sunlight and so on and so forth. So it's a lot of case of learning after, but what we do now see is design guidance coming through that does look for less heat absorption through UV and also more sort of passive cooling, better shading, better screening, screening being put on the outside with slats and so on and so forth. So yes, I can assure you it is an issue that the industry is waking up to, and if it's any consolation, not are we just doing it because we want to do it, we will have to do it. It is expected to be in future building regulations and indeed in the London plan. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scott MacDonald.
Thanks for the report. I'm really intrigued by the perception survey. It looks really interesting, and like working cross-departmental on it to get a sense of how residents are feeling. Is this going to be commissioned with an outsider, or is it council coming up with the survey and things like that? And I suppose I'm also concerned about people living with disabilities, people who don't always show up, and sort of what work is going to be done in that space. I know with the adults team, it's really good to connect with them so that you can have the access to people with learning difficulties or people or carers or things like that. So just people who are slightly at the margins, how are you going to get their views into this survey? But I love it though. I think it's a great idea.
So just on the, one of the things that we spoke about earlier, coming up to scrutiny, is how one of the things that we want to get better at is working across departments, and perception survey definitely helps to achieve that through feeding into kind of information from other departments. So we mentioned the housing and community safety kind of data that we kind of accessing as well. So I think in terms of, I can't read my own handwriting there, but so in terms of the actual perception survey, I think it is quite an exciting thing, and it's also going to help us inform how we do the engagement early on, I think, because one of the things that I was talking to them about yesterday actually is in the past, obviously you deliver on what is statutorily required or what the minimum required, but what we want to do is start working with residents who are living there even before we get to the stage of starting to think about the regeneration, but actually start working with residents and housing to kind of lead to that point. So when we are ready to start working on the regeneration, we've already got an understanding of their experiences and their perception of where they live and how a regeneration would work in their favor as well. So I think it's more about understanding what kind of experiences they want to avoid and then starting the process so it doesn't feel like a new process to them out of nowhere. But yeah, I'll let you come back to on the other parts of it.
Thank you. I think stepping back, the perception surveys are just another part of being a good landlord. It's not in order to achieve a regeneration scheme and conduct interviews and consultations when you have designs that you want feedback on. I've worked on regeneration projects where the communities have not been understood, and when it comes to wanting feedback on designs, you won't get the door opened, or when you do, you'll get a complaint about why weren't my bins emptied 3 years ago, why weren't the rodents dealt with, the cars moved, etc., etc. And you do not want to be proposing regeneration when the community feel as though they haven't been listened to, and now you want their opinion. So that's where the perception comes in. It lays an understanding, and it shows that you listen anyway, not here's a plan, what do you think? So that is what we are looking to do, and the essence of what we're saying here is that it is a joint-up approach to regeneration and housing engagement and the community engagement strategies that are already in place, and not making this an afterthought and not coming back into to fill the gaps. we have to do certain processes anyway. So if, for instance, we are leading into a ballot in order to go for grant funding and conform with the Mayor's guidance on estate regeneration practice and the capital funding guide, we will have to do the ballots. But there's no point doing a ballot if you haven't engaged naturally, because it's your day job as a landlord. So my emphasis to this programme is don't find out what they think about your regeneration, find out what they think about their lives in the council, and then we build forward on that. Easier said than done, obviously, because there's only so much you can put in a questionnaire, and there are other things at the moment that we have to seek feedback on in terms of the asset investment programme, and there are grant windows that we need to use, so there may be questions more to do with home improvements and so on. Plus the consultation fatigue. You know, there's only so many times people want to be asked a question before they say what you're going to do about it. But it's more about the ethos as well, that we listen before we then ask you what you think of our idea.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. I mean, I think this is a good paper and it outlines the correct way forward. But I wondered if you could give us an indication on the time, like when the perception surveys will go out, because in the next steps it talks about 12 to 18 months, but I can't work out, I may be misreading whether that's that you're going to do the perception surveys then, or after you've done the perception surveys you will inform people within 12 to 18 months.
Okay, so first of all, the perception surveys have to be commissioned, so working with colleagues in-house, and we have to agree, you know, a combined approach to how we engage, and, you know, agree about that with, obviously, you know, comms colleagues as well. Then how do we undertake it, whether we use the existing resources or we use specialists, you know, to go out, and often they can be of a benefit because they can be seen to be independent. Yep. So we've got to work out that. So there's the commissioning process. Then there is the design of the survey itself. That will then obviously need approvals within the council because it is a formal engagement process. Then we need to execute and resource it. So the 12 to 18 months is quite a broad period because in that there are a lot of moving parts. It's not like a production line when you press a button, you know it's coming off the end. If you want, we can be more precise on that. I'm very happy to you know, drill down, provide more structure around that answer and show case studies if you would like that. But at the moment we've had to keep it slightly loose, also bearing in mind that what you do not want to be doing is perception surveys during an election period and PERDA and even the pre-election period now. So we're recognising that we don't want to confuse the politics with the need to understand, you know, how people feel about their homes. Yeah, but I'm very happy to volunteer to get more detail on that 12 to 18 months, and as I say, best practice examples.
Yeah, I don't think we'd require that really. I was just looking for like a ballpark timing, to be honest. But the other thing is there's been lots of changes in housing policy, probably even since you even wrote this paper, I'd imagine, in terms of like the proportion of affordable housing, etc. And it's just an incredibly difficult time for development at the minute. Like employment in construction, I think, is the lowest for 25 years. Viability is an absolute nightmare. How do we think we'd realistically be able to actually deliver regeneration that's going to be successful, like with partners?
How long do we have? Okay, so what we have to do is be, you know, realistic, but not afraid of any challenge and any solution that is out there. So what I've said to the team is that we cannot rush into the estate regeneration programme that was discussed at Cabinet in March 24 and the reference to the selected sites. The reason being is that we do not want to assume that what we've done before is going to work in the future, whether that be the method of survey, the method of procurement, design, etc., etc. So what we need to do is take stock, learn, but plot out what does the future look like. Now, at the moment, as you say, things are changing, and even in the last couple of weeks, they've changed with the drop to 20%, for instance. However, that is a temporary drop. It's been emphasised as a crisis emergency solution to the London problem. We don't think it'll necessarily go on beyond the 2-year window, but what it does demonstrate is that what do we know might happen in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Regeneration programs take 25 years, basically. Yeah. So what I'm saying at the moment is we've got to have a range of strategies that allow us at a certain point in time to know what we're going to do, not reach the problem and try to work it out. Yeah. So it sounds like things are going slow, but I can guarantee everyone, if we get some of the building blocks right now, we will get that time back in 5, 10, 15 years. So to give you some examples, for instance, on the 7th of November, the GLA released their prospectus guide for the 26 to 36 Affordable Homes programme. We don't know what the levels of grant are going to be. We don't know what all of the conditions are going to be for estate regeneration. And many of these programs are likely to be coming on stream during that period. So all we can do is work on the basis of having all our options available. For instance, if we don't see enough grant available or the conditions on estate regeneration, do we look for more mixed tenure developments? Yep. And does that mean we need to look at more estates in order to get more affordable housing? Because if we need to get more private off one estate, we've got to split it more. Another example being, how do we approach design? So we've learned in the last 3 to 4 years that a lot of the designs that were viable are no longer viable because of the second staircase. Yeah? So the lesson there is to not be so certain your design is correct that when you come to build it, suddenly you can't, and you go backwards 3 or 4 steps. Yeah? Another example is social value and employment and so on and so forth. So can we use estate regeneration to bring to the talent? And there is a severe crisis in talent in the built environment industry. Another issue is, for instance, the capacity in the HRA with all of the challenges it has in terms of asset investment and temporary accommodation. So to make sure we have a business plan that is not solely reliant on one solution through the HRA as we've been done, as has been done before. I don't have the answers to all of those. That's what we're working on. But the point is that we have big ambitions, but the ambitions have got to be built on really big thinking and lots of solutions available, and be able to adapt. Because I can guarantee you, if I give you an answer today, I'm probably giving you a different answer in a year's time. Yeah, and therefore, for us to be regularly brought back here, I would say, colleagues may regret me saying this, but to be checked. Are we keeping on track? Are we keeping on our toes? Are we looking for the best solutions and best practice? Rather than what could have been the risk is that we entered into a programme based on Kidbrooke and Woolwich. As good as they are, but not assume that we've got it right. Never assume we've got it right. Keep on checking. Yeah.
Gardner?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I want to put the record straight, because this is always done, and I had to get it straight. The Woolwich estates are half in Charlton. So Marion Road redevelopment is entirely in Charlton, and a lot of the Morris Walk, now Trinity Park, is in Charlton. Which brings me on to so I'd like us to sort of get that right, but brings me on to another point, which is if you look at Trinity Park and the the western side of it, which used to be blocks of flats like Viking House. I mean, they were perfectly good, but the whole estate got knocked down. And there were bits of the Ferrier that could have been kept. And my slight concern, obviously you've got the embedded carbon involved in demolition, and I think it's acknowledged now there should be a presumption against demolition. But also, when we've got so many leaseholders, it causes all sorts of issues if you are starting to demolish things. So obviously there might be some blocks which structurally are totally beyond redemption. But can we look more at regeneration in terms of refurbishment, maybe adding a story or two, better using the land and so forth, rather than just knocking everything down and starting again? Because I remember I was a councillor first when we were doing the Kidbrooke regeneration, and Ferrier was being, it was still there. But for years, it was like a ghost town because people were moving out, they lost confidence, they knew it was going to be redeveloped. And that was also the case on the Connaught. It was like a ghost town, it was a horrible place to live, we had to put extra police, and it was the same in on Morris Walk, and then also more recently in Marion Road, where we took some emergency action, which was very good, to get it demolished in Marion Road after Councillor Mohammed spoke up for the issues that were there. But that has to be really well planned. So having a more mixed development, and I would point you towards the Hyde experience in Brookhill. As ward councillors, we were very involved in that when I was a councillor in Woolwich Common. Their execution has not been so good, but firstly, their ability to work with residents, co-design, was brilliant. And secondly, because they're doing it in phases, those that are staying, like the homeowners, leasehold homeowners, are being moved in first, as it were, because they're doing it in phases. So you get that continued sense of community, which is really, really important, and people feel it's their redevelopment and their regeneration. So I'd like your commentary on that. And just another observation I'd like to comment on. It seems to me, Kidbrooke I think is really good. Kidbrooke Village I think is really, really good. And it's really nice, but it seems to me in both Kidbrooke Village and the Woolwich and Charlton Estates, from the data here, we've got fewer social homes than what we started with. And we just cannot afford that. We've lost enough through right to buy and so forth. And obviously we need more social homes, not fewer social homes. So how, given the state of viability and the points Councillor Smith made, I do think we have to tread very, very carefully down this path. So we're not in a position, I'm all for mixed development, absolutely. And, but at the same time, we don't want to reduce the number of social homes available, which we know are in such desperate demand.
I'll just quickly come in and then I'll let Dermot come in soon after. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Councillor Gardner. In terms of when we're doing estate regeneration, we do have to consider the environmental impacts of the projects themselves. And both Woolwich Estates, which is now the formerly Connaught, Morris Walk, Marion Grove and Marion Road, I'm very familiar with. I grew up around the corner from there. So I know the transformation that's taken place there. And so in terms of the change that's happened there, and also the change that's happened in the former Ferry Estate, now Kidbrooke Park Road, I think if you look at Kidbrooke Park, where there was just over 1,900 homes, there is well over 5,000, and also you've got an acre of green land and open space that's been created as well. As you mentioned, it's a great project. So I think going forward, obviously, when we look at our biodiversity plan and when we look at good placemaking and when we look at environmental impact, these are things that will be considered. But when you look at what the decisions made at Kidbrooke Park, it seems like it was the right decision because you created more homes in an area that, from my knowledge and experience of Ferry Estate, for example, the changes were very welcome as well. So it's not to say that that will be the case everywhere. And I think that's something that we will bear in mind. When you look at social housing, Kidbrooke Park is one of the largest social housing developments in Europe at the moment. And obviously the project's ongoing, so it'll be completed by 2035, for example. So there are still more units coming forward. So I think in terms of what's happened there, I think it's been a great example of actually replacing the old with the new, but it doesn't mean that it will work everywhere else. But yeah, so I'll let, do you want to come in on the... Sure. Thanks.
First of all, completely agree about the Charlton label being missed off the so-called Woolwich Estates and now being called Trinity Walk. So yeah, agree with that one. So two elements here, the reuse of existing buildings and the social rented homes being protected. I'm a great advocate of reuse being the first option. And I was delighted to see in the aforementioned guidance coming out from the GLA last week about the 2026 to 36 Affordable Homes Programme that they are also going to consider the refurbishment and remodelling of existing properties as counting towards new homes. And that is a big change. That is a really big change. And that has been why in the past, or the absence of that in the past, has been why it's been a very binary refurbish, but you need to use one form of grant or your own investment funds. Or if you want affordable homes grant, you've got to knock down and rebuild. So they've recognised that that has probably caused in the past some decisions that don't make sense, but if you want the grant, you've got to knock down and start again. So it is consultation and it is a bidding guide, so let's see where it goes. But hopefully that will demonstrate that the industry is moving towards what we think should be the first protocol, which is reuse. What we do have to recognise, however, is that the reuse of existing buildings can in themselves completely fetter what might be the bigger gain in terms of public realm and your ground floor facilities and so on. That's my only caveat to do that. Another reason I do support the reuse of existing buildings, particularly if we have an investment case for refurbishing them, is that can be quicker and that can unlock our decant opportunities and save at the early end of a programme. So rather than having to empty building, remove everybody, knock it down, rebuild and move people back in, if you are shuffling people around, you know, I've seen it time and time again, the acceleration you get with a good decant strategy makes or breaks a project. So having the ability to do that, because it is funded, will be music to our ears. Plus it does save a sense of the place and so on. So hopefully you'll see that the industry is moving towards that way, but clearly the proof is in the pudding. Depends how much grant we get for it, whether the buildings are fit for purpose. Some of them, unfortunately, have just gone too far. But I think we've moved from the case where only new build, as rather new build is the only option. And I completely agree with your point about social rents. Clearly, we do want mixed communities, but we can't meet the housing demand and the growing pressure on temporary accommodation if, in order to get new housing numbers, we are diluting the social rent numbers as well. There is the assumption currently that the Affordable Homes Grant will be predicated on additionality. So in estate regeneration, we will need to demonstrate that we are providing more new social or affordable homes. If we do that, then we will get grant for the replacement homes as well. So rather than, and this isn't set in stone, but this is the direction of the guidance at the moment. It just makes complete sense, not just because it's the right thing to do. For the business case, additionality is going to unlock more grant anyway. So hopefully you won't see this position where, in order to regenerate, you sacrifice social, but you get lots of new homes. Additional social is really emphasised strongly in this new guidance. So fingers crossed. It will ultimately depend on the level of grant as well, because that's the warning that's coming out at the moment, is not to expect a huge jump in the level of grant as we're all pushing for at the moment.
Vandenbroek.
Thanks. Yes, I was going to say about the refurbishment and reuse, and I was thinking also, coming at it from a slightly different angle, about whether it, is it all or nothing on an estate? There may be parts of it that need rebuilding, coming down and rebuilding, and parts that could be refurbed or are even good as they are. And the new whole could be much better than the old. So I'm glad that that's being looked at and thought about. And the only other point I had was quite a small one, and that was, I was alerted by the thing about PTAL. Just ensuring that within any new estate that there's a lot of permeability, that there's paths where you can reach perhaps different roads and different buses and things. Just make sure that that's always there so people can do that. I was particularly shocked once when I found out that there was this wouldn't be a regen thing, but it's related, a place in Blackheath Park that had a PTAL of, hang on, which way round is it? The worst. 0 or something. And yet, actually, Kidbrooke Park Road, it's only half a kilometre away, but you can't get there. So I think as part of all regeneration, it's really important to be putting in permeability, new footpaths, new routes for people to get to different places. I'll just throw that one in now. Thanks.
I'll just pick up on that. It's interesting to say that because we're also seeing that kind of essence being demonstrated in the New Towns Task Force report, referring to new towns and how, in many cases, although they were based on a lot of traffic at the time, the learnings of that were the more permeable the place is, the better the community, because they encourage not just more sustainable transport, they just encourage people to integrate, and kids using each other's playgrounds and chasing each other around and so on. So while it is about sustainability, I think it's about community as well.
Councillor Pearce?
Yeah, just a few sort of final comments, and it's great to see this piece of work being done, and particularly like the elements of resident and tenant engagement that you've included as well. But just to add my voice to David's point earlier about the social rent, if you've got a waiting list of 25,000 in the borough, and you get a net kind of social rent increase of 700 residences from whatever it is, like 20-year project, then that's but you've kind of answered that already, so I'm gonna
What I will add is, again, this is how it's all interrelated. The move towards rent convergence does actually help the model for funding social rent as well. So, hopefully what we'll see is, other fiscal measures move towards supporting the council in being able to sustain more social rent homes coming through, not just the estate regeneration pipeline, but the builds pipeline as well.
Any final ones? Councillor Scott?
Sorry. My question is more about learning moving forward and better practice in this area, because I know not all residents do come back, and some of it's fine and okay, and some of it isn't so fine. So I just wondered, what's the learning, what we're going to do differently in this type of situation.
And that reminded me, I probably didn't answer the first question fully in terms of making sure that those who are vulnerable are included in this, not just those who open the doors. First of all, that comes down to actually understanding the community and knowing who the vulnerable are, because they're not necessarily the ones who turn up at the council or you see in the streets. They're the ones behind the closed doors. So it's making sure that we understand. We don't just listen to those who do talk. We find out those who can't as well, and make sure we're reaching them. So again, it's built into the ethos of why do we listen and how do we go about it. So that would be part of, have we heard everyone, not have we just got enough evidence. And there's obviously a difference between the two. In terms of lessons, what I would suggest is that the team come and speak to the councillors and learn from the ground. There's no better way to actually learn by walking out there and hearing about case studies. We can read all the policies, attend all the seminars and do all the training, but nothing beats actually learning what you can tell us as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other questions? No. Thank you so much for the report and the discussion this evening. I think it's been very valuable. And I think it's a good idea to bring estate regeneration back to this panel sort of next year, because as you sort of said, the industry and policy environment is changing so quickly. And also thank you for the report. Oh, yeah.
I do think it's good that we have a report coming back, but I wonder if there's, and maybe you might have better advice about this, is how can we track it in terms of how do we track what's going on in a way that's very, I know numbers driven, but some sort of graph or some way that we can track this and keep our eye on it. That's basically.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. We can think of how we can do that to kind of keep it tracked there. So, yeah, Councillor Gardner.
I wondered if I'm not sure if it's explicit in the report, but from what the Dermot said and Councillor Rahman, whether we could have make a recommendation that wherever possible, regeneration should be based on remodelling and refurbishing before demolition. It's a recommendation, not
No,
then the Cabinet would have to consider the recommendation, clearly.
No, yeah,
it might not agree it.
Of course. As a recommendation, yes, I don't know what the formal response to it might be, so it may be a recommendation and answered with 3 or 4 options, but yes, as a recommendation, I'd say that's embraced. Of course, yes, exactly. Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, in terms of recommendation, I think one of the things that we are looking to do in terms of our kind of urban regeneration framework and some of the other kind of engagement frameworks is look at, it's not just a recommendation, but also we need to kind of be a bit more proactive in making that an initial observation rather than just saying it can be demolished, but it's one of the things that we should be asking ourselves as well. So I'm sure that's something that we'd probably want to implement within our frameworks, even before it gets to that stage. As Dermot mentioned, there are things changing in terms of funding landscape as well. They're the things that would have normally restricted, certain projects and how you do it and how you approach it. So as things are changing there, we can also change things here in the background. So I think that's something that we can definitely take away as well.
And if you're doing that, can you just add in it doesn't have to be all or nothing, it doesn't have to be the same thing for every building on an estate, that might be, just consideration given to where possible, where appropriate, refurbishing some or all. Yeah. It'd be that way around.
Yeah. Can I just address that? Absolutely, and I've worked on programs where there have been integrated solutions, i.e. you have relatively newer buildings maintained while over 20 odd years an estate is regenerated. You do see at the end of it, then those buildings probably look like it's their turn. So what you can do is, make sure that they are not isolated and left forever. So yes, I would say it's not just an all or nothing. It's let's keep coming back and reviewing it, because in 20 years' time, those buildings that you left out it may be their turn. Yeah.
Just a quick plug of the local plan again, the new draft local plan, because I think we do have a section within the local plan around kind of retrofitting and kind of looking at the environmental impact and looking at the carbon offset. So I think it's definitely worth feeding into that as well. So I think that will actually set the framework for everything else going forward as well. So thanks.
Great. Okay, so I think we have almost 3 recommendations. One about kind of tracking, one about refurbishing, and one about all or nothing idea, and just sort of working with it. But
I realise in the tracking that you're going to be creating the baseline for this, and so so we're dependent on you on very much on the different things which are pulled out in the report and how that's all tracked. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And and I thought the report was great. It was also nice to see some kind of like reflections as well about kind of the challenges in tracking residents in the past and kind of how that's changed. I thought it was all kind of really reflective and appreciated. Okay, great. We will thank you very much for your time, and we'll close that item. Much appreciated. So we're moving on to item 7. It's the final item, and it's just the commissioning of future reports. So the next meeting will be on the 15th of January 2026. We have Highways Asset Management Plan and jetties, piers, wharves and dry docks on the agenda, and a potential one on community asset transfer as well. So just for you to note that those work items are coming. Great. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll close the meeting. No, thank you very much. Okay, this meeting's closed. Thank you.